It's January 5th, and as the dust of the holidays settle, I finally get around to making this video, which is based on what is essentially a personal memoir of 2023. On the evening of December 31st, I wrote this. The year is nearly done. At this point in my life, at the age of 43, I can honestly, with full confidence, say I am confident about nothing. That confidence is a farce, a logical fallacy. For how can one be confident in anything if everything is always changing? Surely to be confident is to be hopeful with a touch of delusion and nothing more. This conclusion converges seamlessly with my unfailing surprise at how disappointing people can be. Both are perhaps rooted in expectations of people and things that biasly align with my own values, and like most folks, I bear the burden of my convictions unambiguously. Though I realize these perceived personal failings of my own, there's something rooted deep within me that's unchanging despite all else. A yin and a yang, a two-edged sword that cuts deep, disgust and hope. They live within me in harmony and at odds, both always vying for my investment. Increasingly so, I know not which one to give in to. The present world is rife with turmoil. Spilt blood covers all four corners of the earth. A neo-Roman empire's collapse seems imminent. Evidence lies in the rubble-ridden towns, counties, and entire states. Obsolete infrastructure creaks and whines under the pressure of a new world struggling to be born within the narrow confines of the old one. Much like a baby is squozed through the contracting birth canal, all the while fighting to gasp its first breath of life and freedom. This macrocosm of reality influences my microcosm of a life. I have always struggled to make sense of the world we live in, but this era of chaos is exasperating my lifelong confusion, compounding the proverbial existential crisis. Everything is utterly contradictory. Our identities are sold to us only to be weaponized against each other as divisive ammunition rather than to be embraced or enjoyed. Culture wars, tribalism, and self-serving lifestyles are hypermutations with a ravaging appetite devouring all senses of tolerance and empathy. Rationale and moderation are nearly extinct. Those who possess either one are regarded as some unofficial shaman or, in some cases, regressive. When all one craves is peace and stability, but is surrounded by violence and scarcity, it's only natural that one would long for a place to call home. In the pit of my stomach lies what feels like a heavy, sunken homing device that's sending out signals to an elusive source, which I imagine embodies my version of home. Because of indoctrinations spoon-fed to us from birth, I, like everyone, am convinced that anything of merit or meaning could only exist outside of me, thanks inherently sinful ideology. But remaining cognizant of this fact helps remind me that not only do I innately possess merit and meaning, but most likely the home and the understanding I so desperately seek are indeed within me, as so many parables and cliché movie plots have laid claim. Unfortunately, this doesn't put a neat and tidy end to my qualms. With this knowledge, I must face the inevitable consequence of accepting accountability and responsibility for my own happiness. Another function that we've been taught to outsource to other, perceivably more capable people, entities, and a litany of entertainment devices. But I digress. That consequence is commitment. And because of the ever-changing mode of reality, I fear commitment to literally everything. Trends, opinions, jewelry, relationships, from one end of the spectrum to the other, it all seems so claustrophobic, all of which feel suffocating notions to ponder. And so I contemplate, how shall I dress? How should I talk? What role shall I play on the stage of society? These are, of course, all questions that beg for the answer, how do I fit in and subsequently be safe? All very telling of humanity's current paradigm. But again, I digress. If I cannot act freely, then what do I have to speak of in the ways of pleasure and accomplishment? Already I am exhausted before I've even set out to try on all of these fits. I'm discouraged by the fact that I must conform if I am to survive. Being unauthentic for me is like participating in a triathlon. I'm just not cut out for it. I'd rather be me at the risk of being a loser than win some kind of race against the arbitrary standards of society. In fact, knowing what I know now, I can't help but be amused and somewhat shocked that my child self would have ever aspired to be famous. To be popular in this day and age is to commit social suicide. And so, resigning from said race, knowing one can't win for losing, I find myself back at square one. Maddening, isn't it? I overthink, therefore I am. In my defense, my intuition was all but irreparably damaged not so long ago. It wasn't enough that I was plainly gullible. Someone with an appetite for destruction had to come along and feast on my naivety until all that remained was skepticism and disdain. Character building, they call it. Laughable. So now what? As I embark on yet another year, another new beginning, another chance, as they call it. Chance to what? I am an alienating and awkward person. I talk the way I talk. I search for what I search. My life is quiet when I'm fortunate, and my thoughts are complex. Am I unique? Arguable. Am I alone? Not entirely. There are thankfully people in my life who hold a space for me like the community Eeyore. All this to say, what is this new year, new opportunity really all about? Is it another one of those euphemisms meant to cover up the fact there's nothing new to be had, nothing glorious to reveal? Or is it an entirely co-opted quip meant to inspire self-improvement that serves only the few at the top of the food chain who wish us to be so vested in ourselves that we neither see what we're doing to each other nor what they're doing to us? Maybe it's no more than a hopeful mantra, and that's okay. For me, it all boils down to who am I and what do the days ahead hold? I dare not ask, lest I tangle with expectations along the edge of disappointment. If I'm being honest, purpose is what I'm trying to define, but also how to be successful at executing one's perceived purpose, especially given the currently hostile conditions of the world and persistently emerging barriers to achieving happiness. To answer that question, one must be willing to reconcile self with unself. One must be willing to part with the versions of themselves that were but an attempt at navigating this world with a sufficient vessel. And as such, I embark on a decidedly new chapter in the story of my life, one that brings myself and all the elements of my life into balance and harmony, resurrecting the home, the purpose, and the self that has been buried over the years. Some would sum up the following as no more than going feral. If it is, then so be it. Set me free. Rather than spend another iota of energy on striving to appease anyone, let alone everyone, I commit to being unabashedly myself. Oh, how I wish sometimes there was something more glorious to it than that, some epic climax and resulting resolve. But truly, this is the biggest feat I could ever hope to achieve. After all, I'm just me, that's all I can be. And that's something I've said for years, so I might as well embrace it. What does that version of me look like, I wonder, as I make room and prepare for this esteemed guest? Who I see approaching impresses me and makes me feel safe. She's tender-hearted, fiercely protective, and unapologetically outspoken. She cares not if her genuineness is recognized, only that she strives to live in authenticity. She's soothed by the wind that howls, delighted by the brooks that bubble over moss-covered rocks, excited by the moon's waxing and grateful for the sunrise. She knows so much that she realizes how little she knows, and she knows not to be afraid of learning more, even if she may be proved wrong. She's content to let her next biggest achievement be whatever comes of her simply being, and she's happy with being loved by only those with the courage to dare to understand her choices. She dwells in places that are unanthropomorphized, where there's nothing to make sense of, and yet it all makes perfect sense. She embodies this sensibleness and applies it to her interactions and endeavors. But the thing I like most about her is she doesn't appear to be invested in confidence. She's not merely confident that things will work out. She's sure. Thank you for listening and reading. By now, you may have watched all of my videos, and if you haven't, feel free. They're all on my YouTube and linked in the Ko-Fi. That's Ko-Fi. And it turns out that's one of the best places to support creators and just anyone that you feel moved to lend a hand to. And if I'm one of those people, I thank you so very much, whether you're just listening or you're also sending money for that cup of coffee.